We are at the 12th episode of Lockdown Conversations. 12 weeks ago, when we started and when we had the first conversation of this series, little did we imagine we'd carry on and continue. And a lot of that credit actually goes to the people, the audience who join us every week and give us a reason to continue with our efforts to bring these conversations to you. But obviously, these conversations wouldn't be possible if we don't get terrific people who agree to come on these conversations and share their experiences, expertise, and insights with us. So through these 12 weeks, we've actually, uncovered and spoken through many topics which matter to people, especially during the lockdown times, looking towards our future. We've spoken about the impact on the environment because of coronavirus and the lockdown that's come about. We've spoken about the impact on physical well-being aspects and the mental well-being aspects. And one of the critical things we've not covered so far was what impact has this crisis had on people from a financial and economical perspective. And we've seen that that effect has been far-reaching. Within 3 months, we've seen that the world has lost tremendous amount of its productivity. The GDPs have started going down. Economy seems to be heading towards a recession, and that recession might sort of land deep into 2021 as well. The numbers, you could look at it already. It seems 200 million people worth of productivity has been lost in just the 3 months of lockdown. US, UK have recorded record numbers of unemployment so far, and everybody is aware when the lockdown started getting announced, the share markets, the stock markets across the world actually took a plunge, going down by as much as 30-35%. And people have barely recovered from the shock of the health crisis that they are now, looking deep into the impending recession, sort of, affecting the financial well-being plans that people would have written down. And this is still a relatively easy problem for people who've got stable jobs and could still work thanks to the digital technology. But for the people who were into non-digital sort of jobs, the effect has been even more severe on them. So we thought this would be a timely topic to discuss, kind of, look at what kind of habits do people need to have looking into the future so that, we can make course corrections today so that our future can be a bit more secure. Today, we've got three exceptional people joining us from the UK, the Canada, and from India. I'll start with Madhav Samant. I've had the pleasure of working with Madhav for quite a few years when I was still working with Vodafone in India. Madhav is part of NAFPINCO, and he's worked with Hindustan Unilever and he's worked with Vodafone as financial controller and then CFO. So he's got 25 years of massive experience in this field. He's a chartered accountant by profession, and one of the Madhav's many passions is to help young people craft well-being, financial well-being habits. So warm welcome, Madhav. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Yogesh.
I'm then going to move to somebody I have pleasure and honor of calling a friend, Raman Jaggi. He again works as a strategy and finance leader for GFG in London. He came from India in 2006, and since then has been involved with multiple large organizations as a finance leader, but also working in investments and then reality and also food business, etc. So we'll also have an opportunity to hear from Raman about his journey and then the insights and experience. Finally, we've also got Rim Charkani with us today, and Rim currently is based in Canada but has pretty much worked across 4 continents. She's worked in Africa, she's worked in Europe, she's worked in Australia, and she's worked with large organizations like KPMG, etc. She's again passionate about using technology for financial well-being of younger generations. So we're really, really pleased to have all of these people here who've got broad spectrum of experience, people who worked in different parts of the world and so are very familiar with the economies locally in those continents and also the cultural patterns that influence the investing decisions and the savings habit, etc. So without further ado, I'm going to open up this session and I'll go to Pratik to move the session forward for us. Pratik, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. So one thing that we love to kind of kickstart the conversations is, understanding the backstory of how you got into this space or how you got into what you're doing. This will, essentially also set a context for the audience as to who you are and how you got to doing what you're doing. So maybe we can kick off this with Rim. Do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Pratik, and thanks, Yogesh, for the introduction. I'm Raman Charkani. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Wallo. Wallo is a mobile banking app that teaches young people how to become financially responsible. And what got me here is really from my own personal experience with money, as well as what I've seen when working in the financial services sector. The need to engage the younger generation and teach them, prepare them to become financially healthy young adults. Before starting my company, I worked most of my career in consulting, in strategy consulting, which made me travel around the world and work in different continents, notably in Australia, where I had the chance to work as well in the same space in financial services, in the superannuation space in Australia. And I've also worked here in Canada in banking right before starting my company.
Right.
Nice. Yeah. So, yeah, whoever wants to go next. Madhav. Yeah.
Okay.
Raman will go.
Oh, Raman. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks,
Raman.
thanks,
Sure.
Pratik. Thanks, Yogesh, for the introduction. Thanks indeed for the opportunity to be part of this webinar and be part of the distinguished panelist here. For me, my journey into finance all started way back when I was in school. It was more out of eagerness and interest. I used to find people reading pink paper that intrigued me. I used to ask my dad what this contains, and he said that once you have some base of finance and accounting, that's when you start understanding what's there in this pink color paper. So that's how it started for me, more out of interest and eagerness. Led me to do my graduation in accounting and tax, did my master's in finance. Currently, I am heading the strategic finance and the global treasury for GFG Alliance. I joined GFG around 2 years back. Before this, I was part of SR Group, which is an Indian conglomerate having operations and businesses globally. I was part of their offices in London, principally responsible for capital markets, bond raise, IPOs, largely around fundraising. So that has been my journey. And before I came into London, I was again part of SR Group, based out of Mumbai. Was in Mumbai with them for good 5 years, and worked towards again very similar profile in terms of project financing. So that's my background, and that's how I finance.
Nice. Thanks, Raman.
Okay.
Yep,
So as Yogesh and Pratik said, and thanks guys for organizing this lovely session. Not enough attention is paid to the aspect of financial well-being these days, but especially at times of stress like Corona and all these things going around the world, it's extremely important to focus on these things. So I am a chartered accountant, so I'm a finance guy by background. I have been working in finance functions for the last 25 years. I spent around 16 years with Unilever and 8 years in total in Vodafone. And it was in Singapore. I had a 3-4 year stint in Singapore. And in Singapore, there was a lot of focus within the government circle, the schools and general industry on financial planning. The concept of financial planning I had never understood when I was in India. I have done company balance sheets and P&L for like a lifetime, but I never did my own balance sheet and my own cash flow ever before I heard of this concept in Singapore. And that's when I got intrigued and indeed interested in finding out what exactly is this financial planning all about. And this bug stuck with me after I came back to India. And after sort of calling it a day and finishing off with my corporate career, I decided to marry two parts of my interest. One, of course, is financial planning, and the other is training and education, and decided to spend some time advising young people and elder people, finance people and non-finance people, on financial planning, financial well-being, etc. So that's been my journey thus far. Yogesh, you're on mute, I think.
I was saying essentially we couldn't have asked for a better panel to actually come in and speak on this session. I think, we just got massively lucky. So I'm going to, now actually formally kickstart our discussion and ask you, Madhav, what do you see as a short-term impact of this crisis on businesses and people?
Okay, so it's just one word. It's survival. Yeah. So the way, and I'm not talking about tech, as in, the company is reflected in NASDAQ, because as you can see, NASDAQ is at an all-time high. And they are the bunch of people who will benefit from the corona crisis, which has hit us. I'm talking about the general industry, which depends on customers walking in or customers generating demand. So what has happened is that there is total absence of demand. And in the absence of demand, the one word which is now at the top of every CEO's tactical approach, strategy is now in the background for a while. In his tactical approach is survival. And survival till demand gets back into the economy, and hence demand and revenues start coming back. So survival will be ensured, or the focus will be on two major aspects. One is conserving cash, and you conserve cash in two or three ways. One is, of course, you hope like hell you are not highly leveraged, and your interest outgo is not high as a corporate. Secondly, you chase your receivables and you stop your payables. But then what happens is everybody is doing the same. Yeah, everybody is chasing receivables and stopping payables. So then that's where the government comes in. That's where the financial institution come in and give you sort of, that's where the Indian banks and, give you sort of loans at concessional rate of interest. So that's one part. One is cash conservation. And the other is, of course, now you'll find CFOs and CEOs going through each and every line on the expense side of their P&L and weeding out costs. And that is, will impact all of us in some way or the other. We will see all the frilly stuff going out of corporate activities, layoffs, and that's what you mentioned, Yogesh, earlier on, salary cuts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The key thing is to get over this phase, because when the demand comes back, you'll find that the people who survive will get market share, and which will have a better impact on their EPSs and profit flows and cash flows. So that's what I think the short-term business and impact and approach of businesses will be in the year 18 months forward.
Coming to you now, Raman, Britain had barely recovered from the shock of Brexit, and we were served this crisis. How do you think businesses in the UK at least are grappling with this challenge at the moment?
So, Yogesh, a lot of words have been taken by Madhav, and I think he explained it quite nicely what the situation is. More than UK, I would say Madhav very clearly explained what the global situation is like. And I'm seeing this on daily basis, where I wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning, I start my calls with my Australian business. I graduate to my UK businesses, and then I close my day with the US businesses. Situation is grim indeed. And I think focus for us in terms of reviewing each business clearly is sustenance. What is important is survival. For this, important is cash conservation. That's the key. So again, we are chasing our receivables very clearly. We are deferring as much as possible our payables, our rentals, our financial commitments. We are in continuous dialogue with our financial institutions, with our banks, trying to ensure that we have sufficient cash in terms of managing the well-being of our employees. That remains our priority. Ensuring that those key payments are made on a monthly basis, because there's the industry that we come from, is steel, engineering, and aluminium, heavily impacted from the current crisis. Like steel is a key raw material for car making, is a key raw material for construction, where the industry is absolutely shut down. There is no construction happening. There are no cars getting sold. Steel production on our side has reduced by good 60-70% on some of the units. So impact is quite major, as we are seeing. But yes, we are taking every possible step in terms of conserving cash. Now that comes from pushing out your payables, chasing your receivables. We are in talks with governments in each jurisdiction that we operate. Important with the scale of business that we have, with the number of people who we employ. So I think a combination of all these strategies will be important till we see the market coming back, till we see the demand coming back. And that will again happen with a combination of, again, government support, which happens to be the key. Can't speak much about India because we don't know what's and how that situation is being managed. But UK, I think they're doing quite a good job in terms of ensuring that there is furlough, employees working from home, which is again getting benefited. Employees who are not working are being still paid with the help of the government schemes. So I think all of this is still keeping the economy all right. I would say it's still okay, but I can imagine the situation in India would have been and would be worse if these kind of assistance doesn't come out of the government.
In a way, it actually shows the gap between the developed countries and developing countries, the countries that have resources to kind of, tide over a crisis of this sort, and countries who actually don't have those resources. You're saying something.
So we'll have to wait, Yogesh. Is not something which we all feel will correct overnight, but we are seeing this improving on daily basis now. At least in UK, we are seeing, things are. It may not be normal overnight, but I do feel my gut feel is that over next 3 to 4 months, things will start to get normal. They will. They have to.
Cool. Pratik, do you want to go over to Rim for the next question?
Yes. So I mean, my internet has been like persistently going off.
Okay.
But yeah. So I mean, as much as I could catch up with Raman, I couldn't with Madhav. But essentially, Rim, I would like to understand in terms of the economy. I mean, and the things that Canadian government has been doing with respect to like injecting cash. I mean, I've obviously been following a lot on that front with respect to Canada as well as the US. So how is that kind of affecting, let's say, the personal this thing like finances, or even like from a business standpoint, how's this impacting the entire situation? And we are almost 3 to 4 months in this already.
Right. So purely from consumer standpoint, I think we've seen it here in Canada and US. People are spending way less, even though the lockdown hasn't been that strict as other parts in the world, restaurants, shops, like there are so many closed businesses. So people are spending way less, and the focus in terms of consumer spending has shifted towards sort of forced minimalist lifestyle where people are just buying only what they need, so mostly groceries. And so if we look at the numbers, what we've seen in the first quarter of 2020, Canada's household saving rate have doubled from last quarter. Like I think we're at above 6% versus 3% in the fourth quarter of 2029. So I think it's somehow it's a great opportunity from a financial well-being standpoint for households to take proactive measures regarding their debts and finances, thinking about the small steps that they should have, like just having a financial plan, coming back to what you said, Madhav, lots of people still don't have a financial plan. It's a great opportunity to, take a step back, pause, update your financial plan, think about debt consolidation. We know that debt in Canada, like the household debt to income ratio is among among the highest. If we compare to other countries, I think it's above 170% debt to income ratio. So it's really going back to the basic rules of personal finance, taking advantage of the tools out there that make it seamless for us to save up some of our income, etc. So I think it's both bad in terms of consumer and lower demand. Yes, the government, the federal government has announced like huge stimulus packages. I think it's above $100 billion at the moment. But still, from an individual perspective, it is an opportunity to press pause and look at how you manage your finances and plan ahead for a post-COVID era with your financial health in mind.
Mm-hmm. I have a follow-up question on that, and this is again coming from the stats that I've been like reading, listening over the past month or so, and this is specific to the US and maybe like applicable to the Canada or the UK as well, or other countries. So the checking account balance of an individual, like if you compare it with April 2019 to April 2020, is actually on the higher side. I mean, because of obviously the expenditure is not happening and stuff. That's one thing that has happened. And at the same time, the savings is on, like, I think for every dollar spent, there's 30 cents saved, which is also at the all-time high for that matter. Again, from an economic standpoint, it makes sense. I mean, because it is kind of challenging because the money is not in the flow, and I think Madhav touched upon that as well. But how do you see that playing as well, like with respect to like savings? There's quite a lot of money right now with individuals, like people, but again, they're not spending. And how does that also relate to, let's say, habits, like or financial habits? Maybe both. Rim. All three of you actually can touch upon this.
Yeah. So very briefly, I think I see it really as an opportunity because people have been, saving more because they couldn't spend. It's as if they were forced to only spend what they really need, and it brings us back to really the basics of personal finance around, do you really need that, that brand new car when you have two others? Do you really need that extra, I don't know, biggest house, etc.? Like, it's all about that consumerism mindset that we can, like, that a lot of people are challenging now when they see they see their credit card balances are the lowest they have ever seen in their life. So I think it's there's an awakening happening, hopefully.
Sure.
No, I agree, Pratik. If you look at this on a personal basis, then yes, indeed, the bank balance has gone up. Principally also because there is a factor of we having pushed back our mortgages. We not going out and eating in restaurants. We not going out and watching movies. Most importantly, not shopping. So I think this definitely has ballooned our balances. But rightly said, this is also an opportunity. Markets have crashed like 35-40%. Even companies which were fundamentally strong but were heavily impacted due to COVID has been significantly hit, beaten down, hammered. So there is an opportunity for people like us to go pick the right equities now, stay invested for 6 months, 1 year, and I do believe that that this will give a phenomenal return if somebody holds on to investment who do it now. There is also a thought when people say that you should not catch a falling knife, but I think that phase is over, which we were seeing in the past 3 months, where markets have been kind of correcting falling, but I think now there is some stableness where they are. Of course, it will take some time to get to the levels that we have seen pre-COVID. We may still have to wait for a time, but I do see an opportunity here. And if you are sitting on cash, I think it's the right time to invest, because anyways you can't do much with that money. You can't go out, you can't spend, you can't buy clothes. People have anyways been postponing all their buying plans, be it cars, be it houses, be it anything else. So I see this as a huge opportunity on a personal front, on a personal finance. If you look at it, I think it's a great opportunity.
Right. Madhav, you also speak about personal finance and finance planning a lot. And I would just, ask you to sort of take us back to the basic a bit and actually tell people in terms of when we say crafting a finance plan for yourself, right? What should it comprise of? You're on mute, Madhav.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry
okay.
for that. So there have been, like a zillion books written on personal finance. Yeah.
Right.
There is a lot of advice out there, and Morgan Housel, who is a great blogger on personal finance, says there have been some zillion words written also. But basic personal finance can be sort of explained just in one sentence, and that sentence is: spend less than you earn and invest the difference wisely. So there are 4 key words in that sentence. One is earning, the other is spending, the fourth is investing, and the fifth, of course, is wisely. Yeah. So these words form the basis of a financial plan. Now, the word plan itself comes with various connotations. I read a great quote the other day, which goes thus: "You plan and God smiles."
You're right.
So rather than use the word plan, I would sort of take it slightly broader and use a much abused word called strategy. So you need to have a financial strategy, and then as and when God smiles on your plan, like for example in this particular crisis and everything goes haywire, you get to know what you need to do to make sure your strategy survives. The second part to that would be to have a risk mitigation plan. So let's say, for example, something that, despite what Raman said in terms of markets falling, etc., will help me to have a good night's sleep in the night. I don't have to worry about an interest outgo. I don't have to worry about my, basic expense to live a life. So a risk mitigation plan needs to be in place. So these are the 2 broad mantras, on which need to be right at the start: a financial strategy as well as a risk mitigation plan to get started. Now, and the sentence which I had said earlier in terms of earning as much as you can, spending as less as you can, to go back to RIMS, the need to reduce expenditure, etc. Investing, it's a whole user, and wisely. These are the 4-5 words which sort of will give you the mantra.
You had 20 years of your career doing this, Madhav. Are there any things that you wish you would have done slightly differently in those 20 years?
Of course. And when you are at the age of 55, which I am, and you look back when you're a 30-year-old, you wonder how stupid I could have been in those days. But put it to be there are 3 things. One is, of course, I got into equity very late. Yeah, I didn't get into equity like 15 years ago. So I think I started my equity investment journey at the age of 38, 39, 40, and in decent amounts, much after that. The second mistake I made was I went too deep into real estate. And as folks in India will know, real estate went through a real boom in 2000, 2005, and pretty much till the end of that decade. And it's taken me the last 6 years to get out of that real estate, because right now, real estate is in real dumps. But there is still some, but these, I think, are the 2 big mistakes I made earlier on in my life. And The key thing was not starting in equity early enough, and that resulted in not helping me compound what Albert Einstein calls the eighth wonder of the world. He calls it compounding. I
Compounding.
couldn't compound. Yeah, I couldn't compound my investments to the extent I could have. So I didn't use time. So my message to everybody on the call would be to start early and give time and help your investments compound, which I didn't do till too late.
Fabulous. I'm going to move to Rim now. Rim, because you worked across continents so much and you've had a really diverse career working in a very, very diverse sort of a background. What have been your key learnings working in that sort of a dynamic career, I would say?
Before answering your question, I really relate to what you said, Madhav. It's one of the reasons that really got me interested in this space when I've read about the retire early movement, financial autonomy, and those concepts. And I was like, damn, if I've been told that when I was a kid,
Exactly.
even though like I think I'm not that late, I haven't started that late, but I still could have started earlier. So that's one of the reasons why we started like our company, because we want to kind of teach kids, just as you teach them math, just as you teach them, how to behave, etc. Teach them how to behave with money.
Absolutely.
So coming back to your question, Yogesh, I think here, the eye-opening experiences of living living and working in different cultural settings, and the power of education to actually change lives. More specifically, if we look at today's topic, I guess I was able to see how financial well-being and our relationship with money is very different from a place to another, and how the cultural nuances drive our behavior with money and make us sometimes irrational, or at least have a cultural bias in the way we handle money. So one example I could give you is student debts. So, for instance, I was born, raised in Morocco, and as a Moroccan kid, your parents make sure you never lack of anything. They support you as much as you can. They pay for your education as long as you have good grades and you go to a top university. So when moving to France, I was surprised to see that some students were taking out loans to pay for business school, and they had to work on top of that to make a living while also studying. And then moving to North America, that was almost the norm. Almost all students take out loans to pay for uni. And even though there is no right or wrong approach, it's just cultural. In Morocco, debt is viewed as a bad thing. Unless you are borrowing money to start a business, you shouldn't get in debt. Like that's the mindset. And so, as a consequence of this cultural way of thinking, you can see that debt is seen as a bad thing. So you don't get into consumption debt that easily, as easily as you get into consumption debt in the US. Like you buy a fridge and pay in 24 installments in the US, you don't do that in Morocco. And then another example in the same lines of the cultural biases is when you compare the European market and the North American one. So, for example, for savings, so France household saving rate was historically around 15%. 15% of your income, of the household income, is saved. Look at Canada, it's around 4%. So, and same thing again for the household debt to income ratio. I was talking earlier about 170%, 178, I think, in Canada. In France, it's 95%. So, being able to view all those cultural differences kind of equips you to be critical and makes you think about your own behavior. Why am I doing this? Why am I taking this debt? Or why am I investing more, etc.? So I think there is a richness that we can exploit when looking at all those cultural differences that can help us enhance our behavior towards money.
And you can almost sort of look at best practices that you learn from one continent and try and see if you can apply them elsewhere, etc. Just on that note, then I'll go to Raman. Raman, you moved from India and came to UK and have been sort of in this country for about 14 years now. Raman, Rim, I think, touched on the cultural aspect of things. And I'm going to ask you, you come from a family of business people, right? What were some of the early lessons you took from your home? And who was the person who gave you that lessons to start with? Mute alert.
Okay, so no, Yogish, interesting, and I would definitely want to answer this from my heart actually. And picking up where Madhav left and what Madhav said were also the words of my father. Um, it's not earnings that will make you rich or that will make you wealthy. It's the savings and investment of that savings. So I think that was the words of wisdom which I got from my dad, that even if you're earning 8,000 a month, where I started with way back in 1999 2000, it was like, dad, I hardly earn 8,000. Most of my money goes into eating out with friends, with traveling. He said, okay, even if you can save 1,000, that is important for me. So please, you start saving for 1,000, and then we will revisit this after a few months. So that's how that culture in me started. So I understood that yes, it's not how much you earn is important in life. It's how much you save and how you invest. And I do recall that when I started my career, there were a lot of these trainees who joined with me, and we used to work together. And we were together for quite a few years, and I'm sure we were all earning pretty much same in the initial stage of our career. But what made a difference after 5 years, which I thought where it stood me out, was that whatever I was saving, I was immediately investing. Others,
Right.
whatever they were saving, they had, and I'm sure they were saving, but maybe they were saving and that money was kept in their bank account. And for us, it was like buying one property. That's how I started with my savings. After a year, my dad got me buy a property, got me into that mindset. After a few years, we sold it, uh, monetized some money, put another set of savings, bought a bigger apartment. So that's how the journey has been. So my learning has been that it is not how much you earn, not relevant. Yes, what is relevant is how much you are saving. And the second relevant point is how you are investing, and investing wisely. Like Madhav, I have also made mistakes, and I have learned from mistakes. Uh, One of the mistakes was, and what again, this is my mistakes. What I have learned is money, wife, and property. They have to be closer to you if you want them to work for you. So when in the good days, of course, I went out and invested in a property in Noida. Had Was an absolute nightmare. I had to dispose of that property, taking a 20% hit. Again, Noida, I was no way close to Noida. I think the
Hmm.
only time I went to Noida was when I bought that property, and the second time I went to Noida was
To
somehow when I
sell.
managed to push that property to somebody, sell it, and get my money. Similar experience, had invested in some, because in those days there were a lot of these promotions which were happening. And by then I was in UK. So in UK, I attended a fair in 2008, 2009. Saw some property company coming here and making promotions in terms of getting you to buy property in Indore. So, I bought a property in Indore without even seeing that property. Managed to sell it after 3 years, again taking a massive hit. So I learned a lesson that if you're investing in property, please ensure that is close to you. You can have a look at that property, you can maintain that property, you know what is happening, you can collect the rentals, and then as and when you see the upside in the market, you can sell. Because when we went to sell our properties, we didn't know what the market was in Noida. We didn't know what the market was, how the market was in Indore. So it was the brokers who were calling us and saying that, look, we have a buyer and he's wanting to offer this. We had no choice because anyways, we were not able to take care of that property. So important is that you need, if you want money to work for you, again, that money has to be invested wisely and the money has to be closer to you. Like if you're
Hmm.
investing in property, I would always recommend, uh, please buy something which you believe you can take care of and you can see it from your own eyes. So those are the bit of experiences that I had. Coming to UK, to answer your question, specific question, Yogesh, I came here in late 2006. Of course, it was a new country. It was a new culture for me. It took me a while to really understand the behaviors here. Um, I the only aim in the initial years when I came here was make as much money as you can, save as much as you can. We have to go back to India, and there I will buy a property. I'll do something better. So that was always the thought process in my initial years. So there was nothing around having any aim of long-term investment, or the a
Mm.
goal of long-term investment was never there in UK, because I didn't know how I or what I where I would be, by 5 years, because my visa when I came here was for 5 years. Apparently got into the ILR, which is an equivalent of green card in US that we have in UK. Got into my passport, and that's when I bought my first property, which was, I believe, in 2012. Again, it was at the bottom of the cycle, so that was
Mm.
the first property that I bought. Luckily, because it was sitting on money, as I say, I was sitting on cash, had not made any investments. I was already over my two mistakes which I did in India by
Yeah.
investing in properties outside. So I made that investment here. Thereafter, because the market was still low, I understood how it all works. Bought a few more, got into a portfolio, started making some investments into these small companies through Crowdcube. Sold those investments at some profits, decent profits. But I still feel, and I still believe, I'm not sure what the returns would be here from here on. But so far so good. I think right has been good, because it's also important. The timing of investment is also important, Yogesh.
Right.
And the regulations are also important, because when I used to buy properties in 2012 2013, you had to barely put 5% deposit, and you could have got financing. You could have got 95% finance or mortgage from the local banks at around 2.5%. So it was that easy, and not many questions asked. You just submit your slips and you could make properties. So I'm sure there are a lot of people in UK who have built massive portfolios, because those days there was like 100% funding available. But times have changed now. So today,
Right.
of course, it's not as it was 8 years back. um, but I still feel that now that I'm here, I'm settled here, so most of my investments are in UK. I still have a couple of them in India, but my idea would be to dispose them off and put all of them here.
Sort of regaining control over your property portfolio, so to speak, as we're saying. So I think, Raman, one of the things that it made me think is a lot of people obsess over where is my next 10% or 20% hike going to come from, or where is that extra burst of money going to come from for me. But not many people actually look at the surroundings around them to say, okay, so what am I going to do with the extra money that I'm going to get? How am I going to use it, or how am I going to make it work for me? And I think that is one of the key things, to sort of learn from the environment around you, pick out the right investment options, make those decisions at the right time, and move forward and let that money grow for you.
I will go back to the words of wisdom and what Madhav said. Please invest, but wisely.
Okay.
Wisely.
Right. Do we move to Rim now and ask her about
Yeah.
the next question we had, Pratik?
Oh yeah, I mean, basically looking into the future, talking about like the tech side of things. And Rim, you've been in tech for quite some time, so I'd like to understand as to like what's the future look like. I mean, where should essentially people focus with respect to their finances? How can they learn more? Madhav is also doing a lot of things on that front. But yeah, Rim, would love to understand that perspective, like how internet mediums can essentially accelerate the learning, and yeah, things are changing. So yeah.
Mute alert.
Sorry, it has to happen to every one of us at least once.
Exactly.
So I'll say the financial health can be a very complex topic if we look at it from every personal perspective. But I think one of the key things, and it has been like a common statement among the panelists, is coming back to the basics, coming back to the basics uh, of those golden rules of personal finance, such as the one you mentioned of investing wisely and saving versus the importance of saving versus how much you earn. And ultimately, I think there is a plethora of innovations out there that can help us and make it easy and seamless and frictionless to apply those rules. And I'm thinking about all those technologies that include behavioral nudges that help you, for example, save money every time you spend, or planning like every small spend counts. So every time you receive your pay, you have direct debit that takes out an amount from your checking account, so that you pay yourself first, so you save before spending. You have an emergency fund. So there are a couple, like you probably can write 10 bullet points and try to go through each one of them and apply them in your daily life. And it can be hard because the temptation of spending, the temptation of enjoying life, and YOLO. So we can use those tools that include those behavioral nudges that help us go towards that route. And overall, I think there's also a responsibility from the public as well, from public policy around regulating some sort of predatory practices in the financial services industry. I'm thinking about payday loans, which have like rates, and I think in Canada it can be up to 500% annual rate when you take out a payday loan. So those kind of predatory practices need some intervention from the government, from my own point of view. So I think it's a mix of being responsible about your own finance and feeling responsible and empowering yourself. And also there is some responsibility on the public side of regulating some of those financial services that do not help consumers become financially healthy.
Yeah.
On one of the points that Rim, you said you have to pay yourself first, and Madhav, you speak a lot around delayed gratification. Build on that a bit for us, please. Mute alert.
Yes. Yeah. So it has been, so delayed gratification is something which has these are two big words. Yeah. So gratification, everybody gets. So basically it comes out from that overall mantra that spend wisely. So what happens is there has been a lot of research in India that increasingly in India among young professionals, you find that there is a lot of peer pressure, and peer pressure manifests itself in various ways. So you have to be seen wearing certain brands. You have to be seen carrying certain brands of telephones, gadgets. You have to be seen driving a certain type of car. You have to be seen in certain watering holes, which are not the cheapest in town. This is all comes around from a peer pressure. And if you do not do that, you're sort of not openly, but you're sort of an outcast. Yeah, if I could use that word. So in another way, what happens is in slightly older age profiles, it's the wish to keep up with the Joneses. There is a famous term, keeping up with the Joneses. So I use it in my programs as keeping up with the Kapoors, with apologies to any Kapoors in the audience. So if they buy a car, I buy that car. All this, basically what happens, as Raman said, is you don't end up saving anything, let alone investment. You live on loans. So the whole aspect, so this is what is called instant gratification, that if I want something, I go and buy it. There was a very famous marshmallow experiment done many years ago. Yeah, you guys can read up on it in Google. So in this a certain cohort of children were shown a marshmallow, and some kids were told that if you don't take the marshmallow for a certain amount of time, you will be given a small reward. They again tracked these kids, and 30 years later, they found that the guys who delayed taking that marshmallow, when they compared to the ones who took that marshmallow, they found that they guys were financially more independent. They were financially, so it is all got to do with delayed gratification. So if I want to buy something, I just don't click on Amazon and get it right away. I wait, I
Yes.
decide, I reflect. And delayed gratification is one of the mantras of financial well-being.
Excellent. I'm going to move to Raman now. And Raman, you've already touched on this, and you've said, we were talking about where can that extra money that you've saved now go, and you did touch on the equities, etc. But apart from that, do you think there could be other areas that people could look at as potential avenues or ways in which they can start thinking about putting that wealth to good use from a future perspective? Okay, it seems Raman's connection is stuck a bit at the moment. Rim, you or Madhav, you want to take that a bit? Take that question.
I'm
Mute
not on
alert.
mute, but I'm not the right person. I'm a bit of a traditionalist. Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the rules which I follow on investments is I do not invest in anything which I don't understand.
Right.
And this is to basically avoid potholes. So there could be areas like cryptos, hedge funds, and esoteric structures, etc. But if anybody comes me to sell some investment, I first ask him questions so that I can understand it. And I've kept a rule
Right.
all my life: if I don't understand, I don't invest.
Perfect. Rim, what do you think about that?
Yeah, for me, I follow the mantra of set and forget. So basically, not trying to time the market, not trying to outsmart the market, but rather think long term in my investment strategies. And I'm not a big fan of crypto, to be honest. Just because probably my risk profile is rather moderate. But overall, I would say I'm more of a classist myself, as Madhav said.
Hmm. Okay. So from the attitude to investment to what we can pick as investment options. Raman, I see you're back with us. So the question that I posed to Madhav and Rim was, what would be good potential areas for people to invest in? You've already touched on equities, but is there anything else that you would like to recommend? All right. It seems I think we're continuing to have issues with Raman's internet connection. So maybe I will move forward to the next part of our discussion. And Madhav, I want to come to you now. Obviously, we are talking about the COVID era, and the crisis, and we know that there is actually material risk to life, and that's been one of the anxiety and concerns for people. So so the thing that I really wanted to ask you is, how do we expect the best, but also plan for the worst? This isn't always the easiest thing to talk about.
Yes. So let me collect my thoughts here. So a couple of years back, we have got a WhatsApp group, as people do these days, of various CFOs in the country, and by some mishaps, etc., a couple of them passed away in quick succession.
Mhm.
And what happened was that both these guys were men, and one of the guys' wives sort of related her experience as to the trouble she had to go through to just find out what her husband's or her past husband's investments and financial affairs were. Primarily because he had everything in his head, yeah, and in a Indian sort of a culture, uh, the man ends up taking most investment decisions. Yeah,
Hmm.
he knows in his head generally, or maybe maximum on an Excel file, what the financial affairs of the family are. And it so happened in this particular case was that this person had an Excel sheet, but he had it on a computer, and the password went with him. And this poor lady had to go through hell to just understand what his investments were. So we in that CFO group got a little thinking, and I had just left Vodafone at that point of time, and we ran an exercise where we called it what my family should know.
Right.
And we had sort of detailed out, uh, you know, a series of steps. It was divided into two this thing. And what I'll do, Yogesh, is I'll forward the entire exercise to you, and you can circulate it freely amongst. So basically, what it does is it puts into one place what the entire financial affairs of the family are. Uh, this is an aspect of life which is extremely critical, but is not urgent. And the reason it is not urgent is it doesn't become urgent till the mishap strikes. And we as human beings, we as extremely busy professionals, we tend to delay anything which is not urgent, and we fill our lives with urgent things. So this is at the time of Corona, when we are working from home and we have some time, which we have saved from our commutes, we could focus on this area and sort of make our uh, lives future proof by setting in one place, discussing financial affairs in the family, preparing a will, making sure your nominations are up to date, improving, decluttering your financial life. Our financial lives are totally cluttered. For example, the Indians in this audience will appreciate one of my ex-colleagues in Vodafone. He had, because Vodafone was one conglomerate with some 20 different legal entities, he had shifted different telecom circles, and he had shifted 5 different legal entities, and he had 5 different provident accounts, social security accounts.
Right.
And can you imagine if something happened to him, how his wife would have gone around such? So these are the sort of so this note lays down in detail what you need to do. It also has an Excel file which has in excruciating detail what the financial, bank deposit, demat accounts, mutual funds, insurance, everything. So if one were to fill it up and update it every year on an anniversary date or whatever date, it will be an extremely good step of financial hygiene, and it will future proof, especially in these times of Corona and COVID virus.
And it's more like a sensible thing to do, isn't it? Like, don't leave it
It's
until
sensible.
late, and then don't let your family struggle for it, because you would have worked your life to make those investments and create that well-being plan for you. But then at the last moment, if nobody knows where the keys are, then that wealth
And
is pretty much.
there is a quote in that note which John F. Kennedy has said, that it's when the sun is shining that the roof needs to be fixed.
Perfect. Rim, anything that you would like to add to that?
Well, I totally agree with what Madhav said. I mean, part of your financial well-being includes also planning for your future and planning for your family's future, and for example, having a certain security around your insurance, your level of life insurance, your level of not being a burden for your family in case something bad happens, etc. So it's not just about, of course, the basics of saving and investing and spending, but also ensuring that you are safe from emergencies. You are safe in case of bad events, either for you, for your family, for your loved ones. So part of that is around planning for your estate, planning for your life insurance needs, etc.
Good, thank you. Raman, anything you would like to add on that? Because I remember a year or so ago, you actually went through this exercise. It's not the easiest exercise to start, but an essential one. You want to share your views on that a bit? Mute alert. Mute. You're on mute.
Okay, sorry. So, no, Yogesh, I am just reflecting on Rim and Madhav's inputs which they just happened to give, and I do believe that yes, it's very important to lay down or have some kind of an accountability somewhere of all your investments, so that they are easily available if any event that happens in your life. And because I did go through this around 3 years back, when I lost my family member. So, and had to really, I lost my father, and I had to really spend good 4 weeks, day and night, scrolling through all the files, finding what all investments he had done, where they were parked, what cash was given to whom. And it was very painful. And you won't believe, when we came back from India, within 3 months, I had a will ready. I always keep a statement, but it's in my computer. As Madhav was saying now, it is making me rethink whether I should also tell my password to my wife. But it has every single detail of everything that I have done and where it is. So it basically has all the information that one would need to access those investments or access information around whatever portfolio properties or equities, mutual funds and insurances and so on and so forth that I have taken. Very true. It is all men-driven decisions, so they have been largely decided by me. Also, because a lot of this is not even easy for sometimes for our better halves to understand. They may not have as much as deep knowledge on financing as on others. So with all due respect, but I have created that and it's there with me now. But I did go through this around 3 years back, and I do understand how painful it is. How painful it is, and I'm still sure a lot of that has been lost. I would say good amount of wealth that he, working through all his life, he created for us, but we couldn't, even now we couldn't locate, we can't locate it.
I think good point to ponder there.
Some hygiene point, I mean, it's more of an hygiene, financial hygiene point, which I think one should also consider as they move forward in life, to have some bit of information kept somewhere which is easily accessible to your family members.
To your partners, etc. Well said. Pratik, any questions we've got?
Yeah, let's see. I mean, it's probably like the right time for us to get some. So we do have a good amount of audience still. So yeah, I would love to take some questions if you have any for the speakers. But yeah, I mean, before
I
let's say
one on the chat, Pratik.
Yes.
Is there one on the chat?
It's from Dan, is it?
Yeah, that's it.
So Dan's basically saying that many of the investments come with a caveat that these investments are subject to market risk, and for people who are starting out in their careers, people maybe lower middle class, etc. The risk can possibly wash out their savings. Can it not? And how do you hedge for some of those scenarios?
Who do you want to pick to answer that one, Yogesh?
Anybody, it's fine.
Okay, let me have a go. So, so there are two aspects to this question. One is the risk. Yeah. So as Rim mentioned in one of our previous comments, was that you have to understand what is your risk profile. Are you an aggressive investor? Are you a conservative investor? Yeah, and there are various spectrums in between these two terms. After you understand your risk, the first thing you need to do is to build a safety bucket. Yeah, and that safety bucket could be based on your risk profile. Sometimes I used to, in my workshop say you should have at least 1 year's expense as your safety bucket. But after seeing this corona, after seeing this impact, after seeing this black swan, I now say it's at least 18 months to 2 years. So first you make your safety bucket. Right. It is extremely important that you don't look at return in the safety bucket. Yeah, because return and risk are, two separate sides. So the higher the risk, the higher the return. The lower the risk, the lower the return. Since this is your safety bucket, your return will be low. You shouldn't look at return at all. Okay. So after this first safety bucket, then you move on to the next part, which I would term as market, which is the investments you want to grow in the market as per the market. So this you divide into equity, into debt, into gold, and so on and so forth, again as per your risk profile. Once you do that, you're sorted out the market. And the last but not the least is your aspirational bucket. Here is where you put your high risk stuff. So let's say, for example, you were to invest in a startup. Now, I have borrowed this laddering from Vikram Chabra, who has written a fantastic book called Aspirational Investor. I've also done a small note on this. I will send that also to you, Yogesh. You can
Yes, please.
send it across to everybody. So in this way, if you ladder it on based on safety, market, and aspirational, one can ensure that an investment decision doesn't result in wiping out the entire savings. You have your safety, you have your market, which grows as per market, and then you go into aspiration. Your aspirational bucket could go down to zero, or it could multiply
Yes.
10 times. Yeah, and that's why that risk mitigation, staggering of assets, and laddering of assets is extremely critical.
Well said. I'll just reiterate that the first safety bucket that Madhav said was 12 to 18 months of your expenditure is what goes in that bucket, and that provides you safety cover. In case of a black swan event, taking out your income, for instance, so that you can survive for that period. And then comes market risk, and then comes your aspirational.
Absolutely.
Great stuff.
We've got
Maybe-
a question for Ram. Oh, Rim, do you want to?
Yeah, I just want to add a quick
Sure.
comment. I think that's why goals-based saving is very popular nowadays. Is that you can have multiple types of goals. For example, saving for rainy days, or saving to buy a house, or saving to go on holidays, or saving for retirement. And based on the timeline for which you need to reach that goal, let's say if you're saving for emergencies, you want to save that money as soon as possible. So you want to minimize your risk. That's why that reaches the concept of your safety bucket. So save it on like a lowest risk possible, and then if you want to save for retirement and your retirement is in, let's say, 40 years, then you can take more risk.
Great.
Yep. Interesting. So there's a question for Raman. Asking specifically about the housing market for the next 12 months, and any advice on property investments in the UK.
Okay. So yeah, property remains very close to my heart, essentially in UK as well. And I think for me, most of my investments, I'm actually very heavy real estate as I speak, both in India and in UK. India, of course, has reduced. UK has been my focus over the past few years. So my sense is that yes, prices I think are low, but there are not many properties in the market. If you find a desperate seller, I think a good time to buy. Important are two considerations. If you're buying for you to live, very good time. I won't deny. If you can find a good property, if you can negotiate it well, one should buy. And anyways, in UK, one should buy a property rather than staying on rent. But if it's an investment property, if it's a property which you're buying so that you could let, then important is to understand the rental yield, because that is what will determine the value of your property today and down the road. So if you can find something which is giving you a rental yield in excess of 5%, and if you can find a mortgage lender who can lend you at 2.5%, of course, I think that's a good arbitrage, 2.5%. And if you can get 75% mortgage, I think it would be a good investment decision. Number one, you get a regular yield on your investment, which will be in the range of around 8 to 9% every year, secured behind the property. Second, you will also have an upside when you come out of COVID. You definitely will see an upswing in the property values. So you will also see some gains out there, some value gains out there on the value. So I think depending on if you can do, whether it's for your own living or whether it's for buy to let. So I have put both the parameters across.
We've got one more question coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Nikhil saying, when we tend to be investment saving minded, we do have the flip side on the family front, where we have to take extreme effort to convince them to what our thought process is, and we're not spending, shopping, leisure, etc. Any suggestions or guidance how to manage that? In essence, I think this question is about how do you involve your partner, your family member, in those investment decisions, and sort of come on the uh, come on come on the same page in a sense in terms of your investment philosophy. Rim, Madhav, you want to take it?
Well, I can start. I can try. I think the key thing here is, awareness, raising awareness, and communicating, and educating with external fact-based information. I think it can be hard when like your loved ones are not aligned on the same vision as you. But I think there's an effort that can be done in terms of trying to factually and rationally explain why you are doing what you do and why you want to do what you do, for what reason, what's the end game. uh, well, I would say like it's about two things: having a common vision of the future, of what you want to reach, and the second is educating and reading about personal finances, having some open conversations about building your wealth, etc. And I think there are so many resources out there: blogs, TED talks, books. Uh, there's so much to learn and so much to discuss in this topic.
Madhav, from your experience of talking this at home.
Yeah, conversations is key. And Nikhil, at the end of the day, it's also a negotiation. Yeah. So these things usually end up as negotiations. These things usually end up as, a win-win situation. You give a little, spouse gives a little. There's never a situation as a perfect situation. Yeah? As long as it doesn't go to either extreme, that one has to live like a miser, or one spends all the money and goes into debt, and
Right.
somewhere in the middle we come to a compromise. I think that should be a good enough solution. uh, of course, in addition, what Rim said was totally valid. Yeah, a vision, showing up, discussion on the dinner table on the financial objective. For example, I would like to retire by the age of 50. So how will that happen? What I am doing? What is it to doing? But for that to happen, the expenses have to, So that sort of discussions on the dinner table uh, help a lot.
Nice. One question that I'd like to know, I'd like to understand from you guys as to like what in the current scheme of things, which are some of the apps that you use for finance related things? And there's going to be a big difference because we are talking about like three different regions here: India, the UK, and Canada. So yeah, maybe.
I can start. So as I said, my investment strategy is long term. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
So it's really long term, set and forget.
Yeah, okay.
So I use a robo advisor basically to kind of pay less fees and invest for retirement for the long run. Like there are a couple of ones that, like, I guess there might be ones in most countries. In Canada, it's simple. I do use like tools to track my subscriptions as well. Like there are a couple of new fintechs which help you track all your subscriptions and not forget an old subscription that you're not using anymore. I'm not a big fan of apps that round up your purchases, just because usually they don't give a very competitive return. So usually my strategy is just a simple wire transfer to my savings account every time I know I have an income that's coming, instead of actually planning to, instead of saving. And finally, I believe firmly in budgeting, and for that I still haven't found a great tool, so I use an Excel sheet.
Nice.
Well, from my end, I don't use any apps. See, when you say apps, Pratik, there are apps for various things. Yeah, so there could be apps for the actual investment process. For that, the normal ICICI Direct website, as far as India is concerned, and the Charles Schwab app, as far as my US market investments are concerned. So these are the two to actually do the investment. But as far as research, analysis, etc. is concerned, it's off app. It's all individual, through various ways and means. CNBC early morning and Squawkbox in the evening are two ways in which I keep up to date.
Good to know. Raman, what about you?
So I I use IG for making investments, equities, largely forex. I do take some positions on forex as well. So the IG is an app that I use. It's pretty much similar to an ICICI Direct of India, which I think which Madhav is using. The other app which I use more often is CTAM, which is very similar to a financial newspaper. It's a morning financial tabloid. That's something which helps me to know what's happening on the economy, financing front. FT is expensive, so I'll keep FT aside, but CTAM serves the purpose for me.
What was that, Raman? CTAM, is it?
CTAM, yeah.
Okay.
Nice. We've got one question from Akash. What would you advise a 23-year-old guy on how to start initial investment?
Do we have another couple of hours for this one?
Okay, that's the last question for today.
Yeah. Let's.
So very simple. One thing is, okay, I'll just give you a tree. So I'm assuming you get a salary. You're a salaried person, not business. So it's a monthly paycheck. The key thing is salary minus savings equals expenses. Yeah. So what you have to do is first take 10 or at least 20% out of the paycheck, put an SIP through one of these apps which we just discussed, and make sure it goes into a market. Ideally, an index fund based on a risk profile. You either do 60 into equity, 40. Since you're 23 years old, I would suggest 80-20. I assume here you've already got a year's expense as this thing. Safety is first. Yeah. So you remove emotions out of it, and you just put an auto SIP into a market index fund of 80% into an equity index fund, month in, month out. In 20 years, if you do not have 1 crore of rupees to your account, I hope I'll be alive at that time. You can come and buy me a beer.
I like how you still want a beer after all those years.
Very cool.
Yeah. But the key thing, sorry, I sort of spoke in a little bit of jest. The key thing is to remove the emotions. Yeah. Emotion, so the theory says that successful investing is not about theory. It's about emotions. You need emotion and you need time. Once you have these two things on your side, then, your money will just work for you. It'll do the sweating. After the age of 45, you can quit and do what you like, your passions you can follow. But that will do the sweating for you.
Nice.
Right?
Great. That's a beautiful note to end this at, because we can definitely go on and on, and the questions can keep coming. But this has been a great conversation. We learned a lot. Madhav obviously shared a lot of things in terms of resources. I'll make sure I get those links.
Yeah,
you mentioned Morgan Housel. I'm a huge fan of him. You also mentioned the marshmallow experiment. So I would love to make a repository of all that and put it in the show notes for everyone to kind of access. We also got to hear Raman and his experiences in terms of like how he capitalized on the gains, and there were failures too, but he went on to be, let's say, very like a diversified kind of having a diversified business in the UK and not just like one specific region, and currently is working in different like in the UK for different regions. So that was great to hear. We also got to like learn about Rim's experience, the cultural nuances that she brought up, like living in 4 continents, making like a specific like talking about the specific journey in finance, and now again moving into like a thing where she's actually building an app which is allowing like young adults and kids to proliferate their finance on that front. So that was great. So basically, I mean, if we have to conclude this, for everyone, this is our chance. This is our chance to get back to basics, get back to like conserving cash, investing wisely, looking at what's best available. I mean, in terms of the options that are thrown at us, this is also an opportunity for learning new things in terms of like getting into tech. I mean, there were some of the apps that were mentioned as well. I'll put that in the show notes as well. So yeah, I mean, this is basically like a great overview as to where someone can actually go. I mean, for a 23-year-old Akash, specifically, if he wants to kind of navigate through how the finances would work, or for that matter, anyone, and like have these life lessons for everyone to kind of navigate through. So yeah, I mean, this is great, and thank you for inspiring us, all of us today. And hopefully we will catch up next week. There's plenty more that's coming on Lockdown Conversations. We have this YouTube channel where everyone can subscribe. And yeah, I mean, thanks again. Thanks the audience as well for being there, sticking through till the end. And yeah, thanks a lot, everyone.